So my name's Nick, and I'm a principal analyst at the College of Policing. And I suppose people might know me because in policing, when people think of analyst, they think of crime analyst or intelligence analyst or performance analyst. But I do a different type of analysis, which is futures analysis, which means I kind of analyse the future to try and inform and support present-day decision-making. So to think about issues that are kind of developing over the horizon, sort of in the longer term, 5 or 10 years from now, and what implications those things might have for policing in the here and now. So how we might better prepare for them.
Can you fact check that?
Well, we don't predict things because there's the future is kind of it's not knowable, it's not predictable. There are many different futures that can come to unfold. So although only one future will actually unfold, when you're planning you need to think about multiple futures. So it's dangerous to try and predict things. What we're trying to do is kind of reduce uncertainty, I suppose. And you can do that by binding uncertainty into a limited number of paths. So techniques like scenario planning, for example, are designed to do just that. You describe multiple different futures, and then you test your policies, your plans, or your strategies across all of those different scenarios to kind of identify, are they resilient, are they robust, what will happen if this situation unfolds, what will happen if this situation unfolds, and what does that mean for our planning.
Sounds like a Marvel movie.
Yeah, well, this is why you can't predict, and there have been studies that have shown that when people do try to predict, even experts, they get it quite wrong. There's a book which describes experts trying to forecast things as accurate as a chimpanzee throwing a dart. So it's dangerous to try to predict things.
Your talk here at the conference.
It was called Futures and Foresight, so it was kind of I suppose a message to the audience and to wider policing that policing should do more of this kind of work. So there are some organisations and there are some government departments who have been doing futures work for a long time and have become quite good at it, but policing is kind of at the start of a journey. And so I was using my talk to just introduce a few basic concepts and to say I think we should be doing this, and here are some ideas about how we might go about that. So foresight is it's a human ability to, the dictionary defines foresight as the human ability to judge what might happen in the future and to take action based on that knowledge. So foresight is an individual human attribute to weigh up pros and cons, to evaluate different courses of action, and to invest possible futures with just enough reality and enough meaning to use those things as decision-making aids. And strategic foresight, which is what I talked about, is about scaling up that human ability to the organisational level. So putting in some structure and some rigour to how we engage with the future, and making sure that our biases and our assumptions, which we all have about how the future might unfold. Most people think the future will kind of be a linear extension of the past, which leads us to miss lots of big shocks and events. It's the reason we missed the Arab Spring. It's why we were kind of blindsided by the Brexit vote or the election of Donald Trump. And so to bring those assumptions out into the open and to challenge them and make sure they don't have undue influence on our decision making.
How do you go about that?
Well, first of all, you kind of frame the strategic question, I suppose. What is it that you're interested in? There's a lot of talk at the conference today about new technological inventions and innovations. Are we interested in how a new device might pose crime? You might have crime implications for policing. So it's very much like a kind of a research, a standard research project. You frame the strategic question. You design your approach. You collect data. You look for when you're looking for data, you're looking for things like weak signals, so some kind of indication that your environment is currently changing or might change in the future. Trends, trend analysis is a big part of futures work. Narratives, how is political discourse about an issue changing, and what kind of insights can we draw from that? So you frame the question, you design your approach, you do the research, and you kind of hopefully draw some insights that will be of use to the organisation. So what does this mean for our current policies and our plans and our current strategies? Do we need to change things? Can we just monitor something? Do we need to act now? That kind of thing.
Can you show that this works?
No, not really. So it's very difficult in futures work to demonstrate impact, because often, the millennium bug is probably the best example of why that is. So a lot of people think that was just a lot of hype, and that actually there was no millennium bug, but the reason that didn't have an impact is because there were lots of people working behind the scenes very hard to make sure it didn't cause any problems. So the kind of fundamental challenge in evaluating futures work is, can you kind of prove a negative, I suppose? Can you demonstrate that it was your actions, your response that led to something not happening in the future? So it's very difficult to do that. But scenario planning is very is used by companies, governments, the world over, and lots of people think that that's very effective. So an example I gave in my presentation was Shell, who are well known for having used scenario planning to anticipate and plan for the 1973 energy crisis, which was caused by a number of Middle Eastern countries proclaiming an oil embargo in response to the West's support for Israel in the Yom Kippur War. And there are books written by people who used to work in the Shell planning team about how it was that use of scenario planning that helped Shell to anticipate that and prepare for it, and ultimately go from being the 7th largest oil company in the world at the beginning of the 1970s to the 2nd largest. So there's lots of evidence like that, but kind of actual empirical evidence that demonstrates causal relationships, there's not much of. And there is some evidence in correlation evidence in management studies of companies that have used or have good mature foresight processes, and how they tend to perform better than firms where foresight processes are poor or lacking.
How do we know we need futures analysis?
Well, within policing, we've been caught out by quite a few things in the past. The 2 examples I gave in the presentation was metal theft. It was a big problem about 10 or 11 years ago, and when you analyse that problem, albeit with a good dose of hindsight, you can see how, while metal theft actually became a major problem and kind of peaked in terms of numbers of crime in around 2008, there were some signs going all the way back to sort of 2004 that maybe this could become a problem. So China and India were embarking on huge infrastructure projects, which was causing an imbalance in supply and demand. US Geological Survey announced in 2006 that more than a quarter of the world's copper ore supply had been used, which is evidence of that prices might go up, and that is exactly what happened. So in 2004, price of copper was $2,500 per tonne. By 2007, it had gone up to $6,500 per tonne, and afterwards there was a crime epidemic in the UK, in the US, across much of Europe. And that was because the financial value had increased the attractiveness of that particular crime to certain people. So policing got caught out by that and didn't really respond until 2011, when we set up a national task force at the cost of £5 million, and then there was some legislative change in 2013. So you had this period where the first signs of a problem were available from sort of 2004 all the way through to a costly response several years later. So policing got caught out by that. And one of the possible responses to prevent that from happening again is to do more, is to do futures work, and so to try and detect detect those weak signals in a systematic way and to make sure that we actually act on them. And there are lots of other examples as well of things like that. One of my personal favourites is rhino horn theft. There's a spate of rhino horn thefts across the UK from museums and other kind of heritage centres in 2016, and that was largely due to the expanding middle class in China, meaning that they had more disposable income, and those people wanting to kind of show off that newfound wealth by buying certain cultural artifacts. And because rhino horn is valued in China, it created this black market, which was being serviced by an organised crime group, and they were going around stealing horn. So it's, the point there is you look for these weak signals, these developments, the growing middle class in China, and what implications might that potentially have for crime. So it's trying to make those connections and putting a process in place that allows us to do it.
What's the setup of your team?
There are 3 of us who do futures analysis at the college, and we are part of a bigger research and analysis team. And day-to-day work is largely project-based. So at the moment, for example, we're doing a bit of work that tries to describe what policing's long-term operating environment might look like. So how some of the big social, economic, political, technological trends might come together over the next 20 years to kind of create a new strategic context for policing. So part of that project involves a number of interviews with senior police officers, with academics, with commentators, people who we think can give an interesting perspective on how the future might unfold. Using some other futures work that's done by the Ministry of Defence called Global Strategic Trends, which describes the long-term context for defence and security, and trying to translate some of that work into something that's relevant for policing, so doing workshops, for example, and drawing out the implications for policing. So it's often based around project work and designing processes as well, I suppose. So how do we design a horizon scanning process that can pick up on weak signals and make sure it's analysed and interpreted and communicated in a way that actually lands well with decision makers. There's a lot of research design, field work. Like I say, it's very similar to kind of social research methodology. Just your subject matter is the future, and it brings in a bit more imagination and to a degree speculation as well. You've just got to be careful not to make too many kind of grand claims for your work, and tell people up front that you're not trying to predict the future.
Main takeaway points?
That policing can avoid some of the issues that it's had in the past. So the metal theft example, the current shortage of detectives, the rhino horn issue. I haven't thought about it too much, but maybe the knife crime problem that we have at the moment, if you look back over previous years, you would start to see early signs that was going to emerge as a problem, and that we can prevent some of these things from happening if we do this kind of work and we can anticipate it, and that can save us money and effort in the long run. And the second point would be kind of how I think we get there through our policing's relationship with academia. So we need academia to help us design some of these what are called anticipatory systems. How can we be data driven in our approach to identifying weak signals and potential disruptive things, and also how can academia help us experiment with more creative foresight methodologies, and also evaluate their impact. That question of how do we evaluate something that action today might actually prevent something from happening in the future.
Thank you for watching. I hope you found this content useful. You can get access to each episode's transcript with key learning points, timestamps and references if you get yourself onto my mailing list. Just go to the main EBP Doctor website on ebpdoctor.com, and on the bottom of each page you will find a sign-up form for notifications of new content. Just enter your first name, your preferred email address, and the type of organization you work for. You will not get any spam. This is just for me to let you know about new content and for you to get access to all the transcripts.